Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Happy Brain Science, hosted by HRDQ-U and presented by Scott Crabtree. My name is Sarah, and I'll moderate the webinar today. The webinar will be about an hour, and if you have any questions, you can type them into the questions box. We'll be getting to these questions as they come in live at the end of the presentation or in an email if we do run out of time. The founder and chief happiness officer at Happy Brain Science, Scott believes we all have the potential to thrive at work. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks everybody for joining. I am super excited to be with you all. If you would like to be happier at work, gratitude is a great place to start. So permit me to start with my gratitude to Sarah and HRDQ-U for hosting, and mostly to the hundreds of you that have taken your valuable time and attention to be with me today. I really appreciate it. So I know I'm excited to be here, but I would like to know, in all honesty, your mood at the current moment. So please, if you're willing, type into the question box how you would rate your current mood from 1, miserable, to 10, I have never been happier in my entire life. Please go ahead and type now what your current mood is. Thank you all. Sixes, lots of 6s and 7s and 8. There's a 10. Welcome, happy person, and some honest people saying 5s and below. Appreciate it. Excellent. Pretty good mood overall. Now I would like you to also answer what you think the average mood is of the average person you work with, whether they're in your organization or not. In your typical work day, what do you think their mood is from 1 miserable to 10 ecstatic? Please type in. And now the numbers are dropping significantly. Thank you so much for participating, and I'm going to have a lot of participation as we go today, including multiple times for Q&A. So please type any questions you have into the question box at any time, and I'll get to as many as I can today. Looks like from the numbers that you're typing in, especially for other people, it looks like we have a problem. The problem I'm here to focus on today is that unhappiness doesn't just feel bad, it also drops your performance. For high-performance jobs like your HR roles and the people you serve, unhappiness drops performance about 25% on average, depending on who you are and the kind of work you're doing. That is not my opinion. I am trying to give you as little of my opinion as possible today and as much information grounded in data and science as possible. I have a source for virtually every word I will tell you today. My source for this statistic, for example, is a meta-analysis of studies done by a group called the New Economics Foundation. Why am I not showing you my sources on screen? Because I am just a few minutes from presenting you solid scientific evidence that, in a nutshell, multitasking makes you stupid and miserable. Yes, I know this is a webinar, so let me say that again for the multitaskers. Hey, multitaskers! I am just a few minutes from presenting you solid scientific evidence that multitasking makes you stupid and miserable. I work for you for the next hour, not the other way around, so you choose to do whatever you want to do. But I would encourage you, if you're willing, give me your full and undivided attention and see if you don't learn more, boost mood, and at least give me a chance to get through the scientific evidence against multitasking. So that's why I'm not showing you more about sources on screen. There is more about sources in the handout, and you can ask me about sources anytime. And here are some more of the sources. That's the problem. Solid science suggests we can make ourselves happier and do better work as a result. Not just still do good work, but do better work because we're happier. Now, skeptics and cynics out there, and I'm sure I have some, are looking at the covers of these books and thinking, science, looks like pop psychology self-help baloney to me. Right? So let me assure the skeptics that unlike other books near these in the bookstore, these books are written by PhD scientists doing peer-reviewed research at places like Harvard, University of California, and many other fine research institutions around the world. This is the real deal science with random assignment, placebo control, peer review, duplication of results, and all the things that make good science good science. Now we're talking about the science of the most complex, highly organized object we have found so far in the universe, your brain. 85 billion neurons, give or take, depending on what you did in high school and college, averaging several thousand connections each to other neurons in your brain. That is immense complexity even before you factor in countless glial cells that are involved with cognition. Every brain in the world is different. Every brain listening to me is different. And so you cannot take averages from large groups of people, which is what science gives you, and say, it's going to work for you all just like this. It won't. Look, again, I work for you, but if you're willing, I'm asking you to play an active role and tell me something that I cannot tell you. What's most interesting and relevant for you and your organization, and how can you apply it to the great human resources work that you do? All that science, studies, and more suggest that happier people are more productive, energetic, cooperative, creative, resilient, successful, and engaged. I ask you, how much easier would your HR job be if the people you worked with were more productive, energetic, cooperative, creative, resilient, successful, and engaged? Happier brains work better most of the time in most circumstances, in part because happiness broadens attention. You take in more information. You identify risks sooner in a good mood than a bad mood. You're also more able to respond to what you find. Science indicates we're more intuitive, creative. As scientists put it, you increase behavioral repertoire when you're in a good mood, which to you and me means you have more virtual tools in your tool belt to solve those problems you see. Before I go any further, let me say this. I think happiness is very much like oxygen masks on airplanes. I know I have a big group, hundreds of you working in HR. That's wonderful. I know you are in that. I hope you're in that to help other people. That's great. But if you help yourself first, you'll be in a better position to help other people. So I'm going to present this webinar as if it's just for you and trust you wise HR people to figure out and tell me how you can apply it to others you work with. If you can apply this to yourself or others, and I know not all of you are in an HR role, thank you for the comment, Pam, but to the extent that you can help yourself and others, you will reap multiple benefits, including health and longevity. Happier people show up in the emergency room less. They show up at work more often. I wanted to get all these benefits. I wanted to know the science of happiness, act on the science of happiness, and reap all these rewards, which is why I quit my career in video game development and specifically resigned from Intel about 5 years ago to do work like this full-time. How do we get all those benefits? Science tells us that happiness is largely a choice, and there are lots of things we can do to choose happiness. In today's webinar, I'm organizing around these 3 themes that we'll dive into in a few minutes. Subdue stress, flow to goals, and revitalize relationships. And I'll explain all of those as we go through them. But before we get there, I have another question for you, and any question I ask today is a non-rhetorical question. I would love to see your answers typed into the question box you have. What is happiness? Let me be clear, I do not want to hear about what makes you happy. I don't want to hear about your hot spouse or your cute puppy. I want to know somebody lands from France and they speak perfect English but have never heard this word happiness. What is happiness? You are saying a way of life, peace of mind, joy, satisfaction, being content, worry-free, feeling good. Excellent answers. Let me show you how scientists, and therefore I, define happiness as positive emotions, but also meaning and satisfaction. Scientists use the term subjective well-being, which tries to capture this. We are talking about positive emotions. Positive emotions are wonderful and short-lived. Something good happens to us, our mood goes up, and then almost inevitably before long, it comes back down to a happiness set point that we each seem to have. It varies from person to person, but each of us has this happiness set point that we tend to return to after events good and bad. Happiness does include those positive emotions, and some of the happiness activities I'll be sharing with you today will give you a short-term boost in positive emotions. Skeptics or cynics might think, well, why would I do a happiness activity if the benefits aren't going to last very long? The benefits of brushing your teeth don't last very long, but it's an excellent idea to do it at least once and preferably twice a day or more. I believe the same is true for happiness activities that boost positive emotions. The fact that the boost in emotions might not last that long means that you should apply frequently, not give up on it. So we're talking about those positive emotions, but as several of you wise people attending here today typed in, thank you, it's also about meaning and satisfaction. I'm a good colleague. I help people thrive at work. I help people be more fulfilled. We make a difference in the world. Whatever brings meaning to your life, I mean all that meaning and satisfaction as well. Depending on how you were raised, that might sound more like joy. I don't care what word you want to use. I'm going to keep using the word happy, and just know that I mean a deep, lasting, satisfying sense of happy. There are three things I want you to know about happiness in general before we dive back into those themes. The first is that according to the data, it is better to pursue happiness frequently than to pursue occasional, very intense happiness. Science says if you're waiting for one big thing to make you really happy, stop waiting, because it probably won't make as much difference as you think, and the effect won't last very long. It's better to get lots of little moments of happiness. You end up with more happiness overall in the end. A decent analogy here is the San Diego 2012 fireworks. Anybody happen to see the San Diego 2012 fireworks live or on video perhaps? Well, you're all about to. So picture the scene. You and your colleagues go on an offsite in San Diego, and you are expecting an hour-long extravaganza. You spread out the blankets, and due to a malfunction, you get this. This is not time-lapse. Due to a malfunction, all the fireworks went off in about a minute in San Diego in 2012. You are watching 99% of the San Diego 2012 fireworks. And that's about it. So your friend who's 1 minute late comes running up. Your colleague says, "Oh, dude, I missed the fireworks. How were they?" And you say, "Really intense." And they say, "So they were awesome?" And you say, "No, kind of lame and disappointing." Decent analogy for happiness. As one example of many, sorry I have no cash for anyone, but if I gave you all $1,000 to make you or a colleague happy, science says you'd get more happiness out of it, spending it $20, $25 at a time instead of all grand at once on one thing. Pursue frequent happy moments. The next thing I want to get out of the way is that there is such a thing as being too happy, and good news, I'm not it. With all due respect to cheerleaders, I'm not a cheerleader, and I find those constantly super chippy people, "How are you doing?" kind of annoying as well. I am not just Pollyanna positive, and I'll reinforce this just with the very end of a story with my wife, who told me one day, and I should add, with love in her heart and a smile on her face, she said to me one time, quote, "Oh yeah, you were asleep. You want to know how I know you were asleep? 'Cause you weren't complaining." So that's my anecdotal evidence to you that I am not just constantly blissed out. And we're at the very fuzzy correlation-only end of the data now, but the data suggests that none of us should be striving for constant bliss. Those who say they are about 8 out of 10 happy are most creative, most productive, live the longest. Why? Well, we're into speculation from scientists now, but the speculation starts, if you report that you are 10 out of 10 happy, you may not be completely engaged with reality. Look, life is hard, right? Bad things happen to us and the people we care about. And when bad things happen to us and the people we care about, the appropriate response is to feel bad. And please, I can't say this strongly enough. The last thing that I am here to do today is make anyone feel bad for feeling bad. Unpleasant emotions, anger, sadness, embarrassment, and dozens of others, can be useful. They are normal, natural, healthy, and can even be helpful. Unpleasant emotions can signal us that something is wrong. They can spur us to action. They can make us less gullible, more attentive to detail, more eloquent, among other benefits. So please don't take this webinar as how to be constantly blissed out. This is how to choose to be happier in the same set of life circumstances if you would like to be. Now, let me ask you, again, a non-rhetorical question. Please answer in the question box if you're willing and able. Where do you think happiness comes from? Is it genes? Is it circumstances? Is it choices? What makes us happy? Lots of great thoughts within. I love that answer that several of you gave. Thank you. And keep those answers coming. Those are great. Here's what science suggests. Your happiness comes largely from your choices. Some of you said genetics. Those who said genetics, you're about half right. We know that from studies of genetically identical twins separated at birth and adopted and raised in different families. Some of scientists' favorite people on the planet because they're our best source of information about how human genetics affect behavior, mood, and more. Obviously, this is messy. Choices affect circumstances, affect choices, affect genes. Those two twins, genetically identical twins raised in different families, end up with slightly different genes. It's called epigenetics. The choices and circumstances in your life affect how your genes are expressed. What was very surprising to me, and maybe to many of you, is that thin wedge for circumstances. According to some scientists' estimates, all of your life circumstances, the desk you sit at, the car you drive, the apartment you go home to, the lunch you have, everything in your life that is a circumstance adds up to only about 10% of the difference between your happiness level and another person's happiness level. What? All I'm doing is working on my life's circumstances so I can be happier. How can that possibly be only a 10% impact? Well, obviously there are exceptions. If you put me in a war zone and torture me, I will be miserable. But for most of us, most of the time, all of our life circumstances are only about a 10% impact on the difference in our happiness, because long scientific story short, you are getting used to everything you have in life. That leaves the 40% or more that I'm here to focus on the rest of this webinar, choices. As many of you typed in, thank you, happiness comes largely from choices. What you choose to think and do. What scientists call intentional activity has a significant impact on your happiness. For those discouraged by the genetic factor, I offer you the miracle of neuroplasticity. In case any of you went to school when I did, let me update you, because some of us were told a very depressing story about the brain from science. Basically, we were told you're born with a gazillion brain cells, they set like concrete by the time you're an adult, you lose neurons throughout your lifetime, and then you die, so suck it up, right? But the story from science is much better now. Yes, some of that is true, but you also add neurons to your brain throughout your lifetime. You will add neurons to your brain during my time with you today. My job is to try to help you add them in the right place, connected to the right things. That's learning. Changes come in brains in a way that you can see on a brain scan, such as an fMRI, in under a month. So changes don't come with a snap of the fingers, but in under a month, you can rewire your brain if you do something intensely and repeatedly. We can all rewire for happiness. How can you rewire for happiness? Choose happiness. Subdue stress, flow to goals, revitalize relationships. That neuroplasticity, that ability to rewire, means that's just the way I am is a cop-out. That's just the way you are so far. That's just the way he is, again, a cop-out. That's the way he is so far. It takes work and effort, but we can all rewire for happiness by choosing happiness. Subdue stress, flow to goals, revitalize relationships. Again, I'll take questions anytime. We're going to stop for questions after this section, so please don't hesitate to type in questions as we go through Subdue Stress. Why do I want you to subdue stress? Because stressed out brains don't work as well in most circumstances. When you're stressed out, you get into the fight or flight or freeze response. When you're in that mode, when your brain is in that mode, your brain is figuratively shrinking. The middle and base of your brain, the limbic system and the brainstem, go to the front burner, if you will, and they say, okay, we're under threat. I've got the three options that work under these circumstances. They are fight or run, or although you hear about it less because it doesn't rhyme, in fact, your number one default response to threat is just freeze. Because if you shut up and stay still, the mountain lion might not see you and you might get away that way. It's great for mountain lions and not so great for dealing with each other and the problems we encounter at work. You will get into fight or flight because those parts of your brain that I mentioned are faster than the calm, logical prefrontal cortex, loosely speaking, behind your forehead that can calm you down. So fight or flight is unavoidable, but I hope you will minimize your time in fight or flight. One way to minimize your fight or flight response is to reconsider stress. So I have a poll for you that should be coming up on screen right now. According to science and the Yerkes-Dodson curve, the ideal level of stress for happiness and performance is, please select one now, A, none, B, a very small amount, C, a moderate amount, D, a large amount. Please go ahead and vote now. Thank you. I see hundreds of you are voting. That is fantastic. Go ahead. I'll give you a few more seconds. And here is what you said. Wise group of people here. According to the Yerkes-Dodson curve, as it's called, moderate amount of stress is actually ideal for us. So I encourage you, please relax about your stress. Don't stress about your stress, as I did for decades. I would get a moderate amount of stress that's ideal for performance, happiness, and health. And I would stress about the stress, pushing me to a damaging high level of stress that is unhealthy and unhelpful. So relax about your stress. Don't stress about your stress. Remember, we choose moderate stress on a regular basis. Every time we watch a scary movie or play a video game with intense action, we like stimulation and moderate levels of stress. So relax about your stress. A good way to avoid some stress reaching you or others is to give and get SCARF. SCARF is an acronym standing for Status, Certainty, Autonomy, Relatedness, and Fairness. This comes from David Rock's excellent book, Your Brain at Work. Let me quickly run through these. Status. In studies, whether you're looking at baboon troops or British civil servants or almost any other group of primates, the higher your social status, the lower your level of stress. Now, we can't all be chief people officer or CEO, but everyone's status can be okay. Please try not to ever start a sentence with, you're just a fill in the blank. That attacks people's status. Unless absolutely necessary, affirm people's status. Sure, you're an intern, but you're a great intern with fresh ideas and fresh thoughts, and we value you. We need status. When we get it, we say we stay less stressed. Certainty. A lot of scientists talk about the brain as largely a prediction machine. We are constantly predicting what we think is going to happen. And when our expectations are met, we have slight releases of dopamine and serotonin that make us feel good and say, yep, this is what I expected. So set expectations where you can deliver them, or even better, set expectations a bit below what you can deliver to yourself or someone else. When you manage expectations, you manage brain chemistry and stress. Autonomy. Anyone like being micromanaged? Almost nobody. None of us like being micromanaged. Let's not do it to each other. Autonomy is a huge motivator. Set goals for people, but don't micromanage how they reach those goals. For yourself and others, autonomy is a need. When we get autonomy, we're less stressed. Relatedness. We are social creatures. We need to connect to each other. When we get that connection, we feel more satisfied, less stressed. And finally, fairness. We like living and working in fair systems, helps us trust that we won't be treated unfairly. So give and get SCARF to stave off some stress. There's more about SCARF in a great blog series that my colleague Ayla wrote on happybrainscience.com. And if you want more than that, I highly recommend the book Your Brain at Work by David Rock, full recommended reading list, including all the books I showed you earlier, also on happybrainscience.com. You also need to cope effectively with stress. As much as these things that I've shared already will help you, and they will, according to science, you still need to cope effectively. Some stress is inevitable, and science says how we cope is critical. So, please cope effectively. Science says, among other helpful, healthy coping skills, 3 of the very best are moving your body, talking with a friend, and practicing mindfulness or meditation. All fantastic ways of subduing stress. We have a couple of minutes for questions here. Again, please type in questions into the question box, and I will do my best to answer them. So we've got a great question here that's a common question. How do you subdue stress caused by people who are intentionally pushing their responsibilities on you, family, coworkers, etc.? Great question. Well, boundaries are important, right? The world, frankly, is going to take as much from you as you are willing to give. It is up to us to say no sometimes. I know if you're a helpful person, and I know many on this call are helpful people. You get into HR or related roles because you want to help people. I'm a helper too, so it's hard for me to say no. There was a transformational moment for me at Intel when I was in a training about career growth and development. My colleague put together a great training with various pay grades and various behaviors, and it was kind of like a game show game where we tried to match up behaviors with various pay grades. As he got to senior pay grades, he moved over saying no. And he said, I know I'm dealing with somebody senior when they tell me no. Because junior people do whatever you ask, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, valuable use of time or not, highest priority or not. So, saying no may be challenging for some of us, but in fact it's a way of being essential, focusing on the most important priorities you have, taking care of yourself, managing your stress. I hope that helps. Great question. Thank you so much. There'll be time for more questions later, so please keep those questions coming. Now, from subduing stress on to flow to goals. Again, I have a poll question for you coming up to your screen right now. A Harvard study of journal entries found the factor most strongly correlated with happiness and engagement at work was A, salary and other compensation, B, specific positive feedback from peers, C, the freedom to be creative in much of your work, and D, progress toward clear and meaningful goals. Please answer whenever you are ready. And again, hundreds of you answering. Appreciate it very much. I'll give you all a few more seconds to answer before I close the poll and show you the results. Try to answer in the next few seconds if you can, please. And that is most of you, so let me pause there for the sake of time and show you that we have a very wise group of people here. Indeed, you are right. Progress towards clear and meaningful goals, or many of you were. And if you weren't right, please don't feel bad. This is a great learning opportunity if you didn't know the answer already. In fact, a Harvard study found that progress towards clear and meaningful goals was perhaps the most important factor in what they call quality in our work life, happiness and employee engagement at work. Now, most of you may be thinking, well, duh, I already knew that. Why are you telling me this? Well, when Harvard surveyed wise leaders like you and asked what motivates people at work, nobody mentioned progress. So the scientists put progress on a list of things they were mentioning, such as positive feedback, awards, bonuses, raises, etc. And then those wise business leader ranked progress last. But the study of over 10,000 daily work journal entries suggests that progress is first and foremost one of your most effective tools for nurturing happiness and engagement at work. So we have a wise group of people here. I would love you to type into the question box, how do you get progress at work? How do you facilitate and celebrate progress at work for you or other people? Please go ahead and type into the question box if you're willing. Set good goals. Excellent comment from one of you there. Yes. What kind of goals? There's a particular feature of goals that emphasizes progress. Yes, SMART goals are great, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound. There's another feature of goals, though, that I'm looking for. Can anyone type in what they think that feature is? Yes, milestones. Milestones help emphasize the progress in the work you're doing. We are very goal-oriented, many of us, and in particular in the U.S., and that's great, but we only get to complete a goal once. We can make progress towards that goal every day. So, please take goals with lots of milestones so that you celebrate the progress along the way. As leaders and facilitators, you can try to remove roadblocks. Give everyone enough resources. I know that's easier said than done, but make the tough calls to prioritize so that the projects you do have running have enough resources so that people can make progress. And then celebrate progress, even visualize progress however you can. I have the honor of teaching classes like this at a major animated motion picture company. When I go to that major movie company, I teach in a classroom that is down a long hallway next to a big open workspace with lots of people in cubes working on special effects for the upcoming animated movie they're working on. As you walk down this hallway at this movie company, there are what look like children's coloring book pages on the wall. That is, thick black outline drawings that are not colored in until they're colored in by hand. It turns out those, quote, children's coloring book pages on the wall are in fact representative of scenes in the movie. They're snapshots from the movie. And as the special effects are completed, this movie company colors in by hand those pieces of paper up on the wall. So as you walk down the hall in this movie company, you see 80% colored in, 50% colored in, 30%, 100%, 10%, 75%. You can't go to the bathroom at this movie company without getting a palpable sense of the progress the team is making. How can you visualize progress, celebrate progress, get it up in front of your colleagues' eyeballs? Prioritize progress, celebrate progress, because progress leads to happiness and engagement at work. In particular, as you make progress towards these clear and meaningful goals, you want to get into a zone, a state of mind that psychologists call flow. Flow is optimal experience. A scientist named Csikszentmihalyi started a whole body of research in search of optimal experience. Tell me about the very peak of life. And what many of us predict is that the peak of life will be relaxation. Please let me lie on a beach for months on end sipping Mai Tais and I will be happy. I know, you're like, try me. But if you actually got that for months on end, you would find that you were bored, maybe even starting to get sad. In fact, when research dives into optimal experience in life, we find intense challenge and a high level of skill to meet that challenge. Helping people achieve that ideal level of challenge where you're right at the edge, that's the flow channel. If things are too easy for you, you end up bored or variations of bored. If a task or a project is way too hard for you, you end up anxious or variations of anxious. But when something you're trying to do is right on the edge of your ability, it takes 100% of your brain power to get the job done, and you focus there completely. Do you hear me, multitaskers? Focus completely for 20 minutes or more. You can end up in this idyllic, productive, happy zone that psychologists call flow. where you're making progress. There it is again, progress. You're getting lots of feedback that tells your brain, yep, we are on the right track. That keeps neurotransmitters and, if you will, the gates and switches in your brain in the right configuration to help you keep making progress. Your sense of self-awareness also starts to disappear. Your sense of time can disappear. If you've ever looked at the time and said, whoa, that time already? I've got to go. You've been in flow. It is a delightful, happy, productive place to be. The problem with flow is the cultural disease we have called multitasking. The science suggests that multitasking fundamentally makes us miserable and stupid. Let me make abundantly clear what I'm talking about, because your brain is a fantastic parallel processing machine if you're not paying attention to two things at once. You can walk, ride a bike, chew gum, and do work, and it doesn't matter because your brain, specifically your basal ganglia in the middle of your brain and your cerebellum at the back of your brain, can completely automate physical tasks. So if you don't have to pay attention, I don't care. That's not the multitasking I'm talking about. If you work on 10 different projects in a week, I also don't care. That's fine. That's variety. It's when you try to work on 10 projects in a minute that you pay a heavy cognitive price. I know some of you probably don't believe me. You're thinking, spare me, old man. I've been multitasking my whole life, and I'm excellent at it. And science says, not so fast. I want you to experience the price you pay for multitasking. So please, if you're willing, participate with me in the following. In a moment, when I say go, please silently say the alphabet as fast as you can, and then count from 1 to 26 as fast as you can, and then type done in the questions box. So silent alphabet 1 to 26, then type done. On your mark, get set, go. And lots of you are saying you're done. Don't worry if you're not done yet. You have better internal enunciation than your peers here. So no worries if you're still going. Even if you are still going, I want to start the next round. This time I want you to do exactly the same thing. Silent alphabet 1 to 26. This time, please alternate. A1, B2, C3. On your mark, get set, go. Well, I've only got about 15 minutes left, so let me pause you there. None of you answered as fast. You all just experienced that while you might feel more productive, in fact, you are slowing down when you rapidly switch attention. Science tells us it is essentially impossible to pay conscious attention to two things at once. All you can do is rapidly switch attention, as I just had you do. And when you do, you lose context. You make mistakes. And you become what Professor Clifford Nass at Stanford calls a sucker for irrelevancy. And perhaps most important to me, you take yourself out of flow, one of work's and even life's happiest experiences, being in that super productive zone called flow. Again, we have a couple of minutes for questions here. Please type your questions into the question box. Oh, there's a great question here that I get a lot in live workshops and keynotes that I do. The question is listening to music while I'm working multitasking? Yes and no. Again, every brain is different, so experiment with your own life. But what science suggests is the best thing for us to listen to while working is silence. Most of us don't have that choice. Most of us work in a noisy office environment. So if you can't listen to silence, then what? Then put on a pair of headphones and consider listening to nature sounds or white noise. YouTube has lots of long videos of creeks and rivers and oceans, and those nature sounds help relax us, and they can drown out other noises. Happy Brain Science used to be on a very noisy street here in Portland where I am, and the noise from trucks would bother me. I'd put on 8-hour videos of ocean waves, and it helped me relax and focus. If you don't like nature sounds or white noise, then try familiar instrumental music. Those don't tax your brain. But the worst thing you can listen to, according to the data, is unfamiliar music with words. Words tax the language center of your brains. If you think back to the days before GPS systems, if you're driving around looking for a new restaurant and you've got the music playing on the radio, when you get close and you aren't sure where the restaurant is and where your turn is, what do? You turn down the music. Why? Because it's placing cognitive load on your brain. So the worst thing is for you to try to be working and getting in flow and then have unfamiliar music come on that's like, and you're like, what the heck is that? That distracts you. So try silence, white noise, nature sounds, familiar instrumental music if you want to listen to something and focus that way. Great question, and keep them coming. We'll have at least one more chance. That's flow to goals. Next, revitalize relationships. And my final poll, hold on just a moment here, and it's coming up. Final poll question for you is, according to Harvard scientist Daniel Gilbert, if you had to boil the science of happiness down to one word, what would that word be? Stable, social, engaged, or optimistic? Please vote. Excellent. Many of you voting already. Thank you. I'll give you another few seconds here to vote. Some of you are typing in. Either way, I can see your answers. Keep them coming. Try to vote in the next 5 seconds if you can. And here is what you said. Interesting. Again, your brain is unique. Your experience may be unique, and your answer may be right for you. But Daniel Gilbert's answer is B, social. We are social creatures. We need each other to be happy. A key source of our happiness or unhappiness comes from the quality of our relationships with other people. Here is the cliche moment where the guy says, if you only remember one thing I say today, remember this. Warm relationships fuel happiness. Warm, quality relationships fuel happiness better than almost anything else we can do for most of us most of the time. So please invest in relationships. Again, non-rhetorical question. I'd love to see you type in answers. What and how can you invest in relationships? Time, excellent. Listening, excellent. Trust, yes. Attention, yes. In a multitasking world, when you really pay attention, you make someone feel great. Prioritize people, yes. Compassion, caring, concern, these are great answers. Listening, having fun, love it. Whatever and however you invest in relationships, I encourage you to invest in relationships, because investing in relationships at work in particular is investing in happiness and productivity as well for both people that are involved. In fact, the data suggests that happiness is literally contagious. Image I'm showing you and research led by Dr. James Fowler, UC San Diego. This is a social graph. These are people who know each other and work together. For example, lines and clusters have contact with each other, for example. Look at how the yellow, happy people, and the blue, unhappy people, they're not randomly distributed around this social graph. Yellow, clusters. Blue, clusters. Even green, which is somewhere in between, tends to cluster. Again, cynics think there may be no causality here. The unhappy people find each other and go into a corner and complain together. That's all this is. Maybe a bit, but the data and the science, and therefore I suggest there is strong causality here. You are literally catching your mood from your colleagues. They are catching your moods through what are called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are the physiological foundation for empathy. They allow learning through imitation and much more. Mirror neurons make behaviors, attitudes, and moods spread. So as an HR leader or any other kind of leader, managing for morale is critical. A bad apple really can spoil a whole team when you look at it this way. The good news is that this is the only place I'm aware of in the happiness data where happiness is stronger than unhappiness. Most of us, most of the time, have what's called a negativity bias. We pay more attention to the negative. Negative comments weigh more on us than positive comments feel good, for example. But here, happiness spreads through people better than unhappiness. So, what are you showing up to work with? Whatever you say or spread in the morning will literally come back to you later in the day. So here's a quick tour of some ways of investing in happiness and spreading happiness so that you can get it back in the